Before the book of Genesis, the untold story of creation. What if everything you believe about the creation of the world is incomplete? What if the narrative of Genesis is merely the surface of an abyss of hidden truths? Now, imagine discovering ancient texts, buried by time and desert sands, that unveil a creation story far darker and more intricate. Texts that not only challenge but dismantle conventional ideas of divine order, perfection, and will. These are the Nag Hammadi manuscripts, unearthed in 1945, holding secrets concealed for millennia. But why? What didn't they want you to know? At the heart of these manuscripts lies the secret Book of John, a text that shocks by depicting God not as the creator of the material world but as a witness to a cosmic tragedy. Imagine, our universe wasn't part of a divine plan but the result of a mistake, a rebellious act by a spiritual entity named Sophia. The world we live in is an imperfect reflection, an echo of what was meant to be but never was. Have you ever wondered why evil, pain, and imperfection exist? This text provides a brutal answer. It was never supposed to be this way. Why have these stories been silenced for so long? Why does the system insist on hiding the fact that there's something far greater, deeper, and more terrifying than what you've been taught to believe? The secret Book of John not only unveils an alternate side of creation, but also places you as a protagonist in a conflict between light and darkness. Do you have the courage to peer beyond the veil? This untold story is about to challenge everything you think you know about God, the universe, and yourself. The question is, are you ready to face the truth? The discovery of ancient texts. In 1945, deep in the heart of Egypt, a group of peasants stumbled upon a discovery that would shake the foundations of traditional theology. Ancient texts, preserved for centuries in clay jars, emerged from the desert sands to reveal secrets that challenge the conventional narrative of creation. Picture the scene: a hot day, the wind whispering through the dunes, and suddenly, the dry crack of a jar breaking. Inside, manuscripts containing humanity's hidden stories. These documents, known as the Nag Hammadi texts, bear accounts so ancient and profound that they seem to carry the weight of the universe itself. But why were these texts buried? What was so dangerous within them that they had to be kept away from prying eyes? These texts are no ordinary records. They are silent witnesses to an alternative vision of creation. Unlike the Genesis account we know, they offer a glimpse into a reality that predates what we call light, time, or matter. A time when everything was submerged in a kind of absolute nothingness, a primordial silence that paradoxically screamed with infinite possibilities. This period was more than emptiness. It was a state of latent potential. As we read these texts, we are compelled to ask, what would it be like to exist in a world without form, boundaries, or any reference to space or time? The human mind, accustomed to measures and limits, becomes lost trying to grasp this concept. Yet it is in this mystery that the true allure of these manuscripts lies. The fact that these texts contradict traditional narratives makes them even more intriguing. They not only challenge the status quo but also shed light on how stories have been shaped over time. When we read Genesis, we see an all-powerful creator God bringing order to chaos. But what if, before that, there was something more? What if the stories passed down to us are just fragments of a larger puzzle, with critical pieces still hidden? These texts invite us to look beyond the conventional narrative and question what we know about the origin of the world, and by extension, ourselves. Is truth static, or does it evolve as new information comes to light? Another fascinating aspect of these texts is their poetic and enigmatic language. They speak of a realm where light and darkness were not separate, where the visible and invisible coexisted as one. They describe spiritual entities with unknown forms and purposes. Who were these figures? Were they metaphorical representations or spiritual realities beyond our comprehension? These questions compel us to reflect on our own existence. Is the world we see all there is? Or are there hidden layers, waiting to be uncovered, just as the Nag Hammadi texts were? The impact of this discovery goes beyond historical or academic curiosity. It challenges deeply rooted beliefs and forces us to confront the fact that much of what we accept as truth may be only part of the story. And this can be unsettling. How do we react when something questions our worldview? It's easier to reject or ignore, but these texts provoke us to embrace the unknown, to explore what seems strange or contradictory. Herein lies their true power. They don't provide answers but plant questions that echo in our minds. These manuscripts didn't emerge from a mainstream religious tradition. They come from a group known as the Gnostics, whose ideas defied dominant theological thinking. The Gnostics believed that knowledge, gnosis, was the key to redemption. For them, the material world was a prison, a distorted reflection of a greater spiritual reality. Imagine living with the belief that everything you know is merely a shadow of something deeper and truer. It completely transforms how we view our lives, our choices, and our very purpose. One of the most intriguing texts among those discovered was the Gospel of Thomas, containing sayings attributed to Jesus but with a tone strikingly different from the New Testament Gospels. These sayings do not emphasize faith or obedience as much as they focus on self-knowledge and the quest for inner truth. This approach contrasts profoundly with traditional doctrines. Here arises a question. Could Jesus' teachings have been interpreted so differently that they resulted in opposing understandings? The discovery of these texts also prompts us to reflect on what has been lost throughout history. How many other truths, accounts, or perspectives have been buried, burned, or forgotten over the centuries? More importantly, who decides what is preserved and what is discarded? The Nag Hammadi texts remind us that history is written by those in power, but this doesn't always mean it is the complete story. As we delve into these accounts, we realize that they not only expand our understanding of creation but also our sense of identity. If these texts suggest a hidden spiritual reality, what does that mean for us as individuals? Could we be more than we believe ourselves to be? What if the limitations we perceive as human are nothing more than an illusion? These questions pave the way for profound reflections, touching the soul of those bold enough to explore them. Ultimately, these texts do not offer a conclusion. Instead, they invite us to embark on a journey, a plunge into the depths of the unknown. And as we attempt to grasp their meaning, we are drawn to a realm where questions are more valuable than answers. Thus, the untold story of creation brings us to a point where something even deeper awaits discovery. A reality beyond comprehension challenges what we know, transporting us to a plane that feels more like a dream than something tangible. Imagine an existence before light, before time or matter, a place where even the ideas of form or boundary could not exist. This is the narrative of the texts unearthed in 1945 in Egypt, revealing a primordial universe preceding any familiar concept. In this setting, everything seems suspended, a state of absolute potential that never fully manifested. But what would it mean to inhabit such a place? Could it be that, on some level, our souls still carry a memory of this primordial state? These texts describe a moment when the universe was not yet, a period of total silence and impenetrable darkness. Nothing happened, yet everything was on the verge of happening. This idea is almost inconceivable to the human mind, accustomed to categorization and measurement. To think of something without a beginning, without a source or starting point, is like trying to imagine a color we have never seen. It not only evokes a sense of wonder but also discomfort. After all, how can we comprehend something that transcends even our language? It is within this description of a void filled with promise that the philosophical impact of these texts lies. They not only suggest that the universe emerged from something indescribable but also question our need for definitions. If everything we know began from the unknown, perhaps the unknown is the true essence of reality. This idea is profoundly challenging because it forces us to consider that we may never fully understand the truth of who we are or where we come from. Yet, there is a strange beauty in this mystery. Perhaps the goal is not to understand, but to feel. The texts also allude to entities that existed in this primordial period. They are not described as gods in the traditional sense, but as aspects or fragments of an indescribable totality. Imagine beings without form or function, yet existing in harmony with nothingness. These concepts lead us to question the very idea of identity. If these beings could exist without definition, could we also free ourselves from the narratives we create to describe ourselves? To bring this closer to reality, think of moments when you felt completely disconnected from everything, as if your mind had entered a space where time did not exist. Perhaps it happened while gazing at the sea or listening to music that seemed to transcend time. These moments might be small glimpses of this primordial state, where everything is possible but nothing is predetermined. Could we learn to access this space more often? Another intriguing question raised by these texts is the role of desire in this primordial universe. If there was nothing, how did something arise? Some scholars suggest that it was desire that initiated everything, a drive to exist, to become something, even without knowing what. This prompts reflection on our own desires. To what extent are they expressions of this primordial creative force? What if, instead of viewing our desires as weaknesses, we could see them as the same impulse that brought the universe into being? The text suggests there is an order within this apparent chaos, an invisible structure guiding the emergence of everything. This does not mean everything is predestined, but that there is a natural flow we can learn to recognize and follow. Imagine your life as a river. You can fight against the current, trying to swim upstream, or you can learn to flow with it, allowing the river to take you to places you never imagined. This idea is both comforting and challenging. Are we willing to let go of control and trust the flow? This primordial state also leads us to reflect on the meaning of creation. If everything emerged from an absolute nothingness, perhaps the act of creation is not about adding something to the world but about revealing what is already there, hidden. Think of a sculptor looking at a block of stone. They are not creating something from nothing but revealing the form that was always present. What if our lives were like this? Instead of trying to build something new, perhaps we only need to remove what prevents us from seeing what has always been there. Finally, these texts remind us that our understanding of reality is limited and that there are more things in heaven and earth than our philosophy can dream of. They invite us to embrace the mystery, to accept that some questions will never have clear answers. But rather than frustrate us, this could bring a strange freedom. Because, in the end, what truly matters is not the answer but the question that drives us to explore, to seek, and to grow. And so, as we dive deeper into these mysteries, we encounter something even more intriguing. A story beginning to take shape but still shrouded in secrecy. The Secret Book of John. Among the texts revealed in Nag Hammadi, one of the most fascinating is the Secret Book of John. This deeply enigmatic manuscript presents an alternative creation myth that transports the reader to a spiritually complex dimension. Unlike the Genesis narrative, which emphasizes order and God's creative power, the Secret Book of John describes a perfect spiritual realm disrupted by a cosmic tragedy. Imagine a scenario where absolute harmony is undone, not by chance but through a sequence of events that redefine the very nature of existence. At the outset, the book depicts a supreme and transcendent God, beyond human comprehension. This God is not personified as in traditional accounts but is more of a presence, the source of all light, knowledge, and life. This entity, often referred to as the Invisible Father, gives rise to a hierarchy of divine emanations called eons. Each aeon represents an aspect of divine perfection, coexisting in an eternal state of balance. But, as in every grand story, something happens to disrupt this peace. The cosmic tragedy begins when one of these emanations, named Sophia, meaning wisdom, decides to act on her own. Driven by an intense and independent desire to create, Sophia generates an imperfect being called Yaldabaoth, without the consent of the Invisible Father. This blind creation results in the origin of the material world, described as a distortion of spiritual perfection. Yaldabaoth, unaware of his own origin, declares himself the supreme creator and begins shaping the physical universe based on his limited understanding. Imagine the irony, a finite being believing itself infinite, creating an imperfect world while striving to assert its sovereignty. This narrative prompts profound reflection. If the material world is the result of rebellion, what does that say about our own existence? Moreover, if we are part of this world, do we also carry its imperfection within us? The Secret Book of John suggests that despite our connection to the material world, we possess a divine spark, a fragment of the original spiritual realm. This idea is deeply inspiring, reminding us that even in a flawed and limited world, there is something within us that transcends these conditions. One of the most striking elements of this narrative is the role of ignorance. Yaldabaoth, unaware of his true origin, creates a system built on control and illusion. He constructs the material world as a prison for spiritual emanations, preventing them from returning to the divine realm. This concept resonates deeply with human experience, especially when we consider how we are often confined by beliefs, fears, and doubts of our own making. The Secret Book of John invites us to question, what in our lives is real, and what is merely a construction of our ignorance? However, the story is not solely about fall and imperfection. The book also speaks of redemption. It describes how the Invisible Father sends a Redeemer, often identified as Christ, to awaken imprisoned souls and remind them of their true origin. This Redeemer does not act as an external savior but as an internal guide, helping individuals reconnect with their divine spark. This message is incredibly empowering, placing the responsibility for transformation in each person's hands. It's not about waiting for salvation but seeking the knowledge that sets us free. To make this more tangible, think about moments in life when you felt an inner awakening, as if a quiet voice within whispered, "There is more than this." Perhaps it happened during a loss, a triumph, or even in an ordinary moment that suddenly took on profound meaning. These awakenings can be seen as echoes of this inner Redeemer, reminding us of who we truly are. But are we listening? Another fascinating aspect of the Secret Book of John is how it redefines the concept of power. Instead of associating power with domination or control, it links it to self-knowledge. For the Gnostics, true power lies not in ruling over others but in understanding oneself and one's connection to the divine. This is a revolutionary message, especially in a world where power is often used to oppress rather than liberate. Imagine how our lives might change if every decision were guided not by fear or ambition, but by a deep understanding of who we are and what truly matters. As we immerse ourselves in this narrative, we reach a point where the distinction between the spiritual and the material becomes less clear. After all, if the material world is an imperfect creation yet still carries fragments of the divine, then perhaps the true journey is not to escape matter but to transform it. Think about how small actions, such as an act of kindness or a moment of reflection, can reveal glimpses of something greater. Perhaps redemption isn't about abandoning the world but illuminating it. And so, the Secret Book of John leaves us with a question. If we are made of both light and darkness, spirituality and matter, how do we balance these forces? The answer, perhaps, lies in the next chapter of this fascinating puzzle. Contrast with Genesis. The contrast between the Secret Book of John and Genesis invites us to explore radically different perspectives on the creation of the world. While Genesis presents a narrative of divine order and intentionality, where every element of the universe is methodically created with purpose, the Secret Book of John offers a more complex and, in some ways, subversive vision. This vision suggests that the material world is not a direct expression of divine perfection but the result of imperfection, an act outside the original order. This discrepancy raises profound questions. Is the world we inhabit the best that could have been created, or merely a distorted reflection of the ideal? In Genesis, God is portrayed as a sovereign and benevolent creator whose first act is to separate light from darkness, bringing order to primordial chaos. The narrative emphasizes the goodness of creation, repeatedly affirming that God saw that it was good after each act. In contrast, the Secret Book of John suggests that the material world emerged from a mistake. Sophia, an emanation of the divine, creates Yaldabaoth without the consent of the invisible Father, and this imperfect being shapes the physical universe. This idea challenges the assumption that everything around us is perfectly planned. What if what we consider order is, in fact, a product of limitations and misunderstandings? This perspective prompts reflection on the nature of suffering and imperfection in the world. While Genesis explains the existence of evil through the fall of Adam and Eve, who disobey God and introduce sin into creation, the Secret Book of John suggests that evil is intertwined with the very structure of the material world. This is both a disturbing and liberating notion. If evil is not entirely our fault but part of an inherited condition, how does that change our responsibility in dealing with it? More importantly, how do we find goodness in a system that is itself imperfect? Another point of contrast is the relationship between humanity and the divine. In Genesis, humans are created in the image and likeness of God, a direct reflection of his perfection and goodness. This idea is central to Judeo-Christian theology, positioning humanity as a bridge between the material and spiritual realms. In the Secret Book of John, however, humanity's creation is Yaldabaoth's attempt to imitate the divine, resulting in an imperfect outcome. The human body is viewed as a prison for the divine spark, a light that belongs to the spiritual realm but is trapped by the ignorance and illusion of the material world. This contrast invites us to ask, what does it mean to be human? Are we reflections of divine perfection or pilgrims searching for a way back home? The approach to sin also differs significantly between the two narratives. In Genesis, sin results from a conscious choice. Adam and Eve disobey God by eating the forbidden fruit, bringing consequences upon all humanity. In the Secret Book of John, the fall is not merely a historical event but an existential condition. Sin is seen as a state of alienation, a lack of knowledge about our true nature and origin. In this sense, Redemption comes not only through repentance but through spiritual awakening and reconnection with the divine within us. To illustrate this practically, think of moments in life when you have felt disconnected, as if something essential was missing. Perhaps it was during a loss, a mistake, or even a victory that failed to bring the expected fulfillment. These moments can be seen as reminders of our spiritual condition, calling us to seek something deeper. What if this search is the key to overcoming the limitations of the material world? Another crucial aspect is how both narratives address redemption. In Genesis, the solution to sin is divine intervention, culminating in the coming of Christ to restore the relationship between God and humanity. In the secret book of John, redemption is an internal process, a spiritual awakening to the knowledge that already resides within us. This difference fundamentally shifts the perspective on salvation. It is not something that happens to us but something that happens within us. Exploring these differences reveals that both narratives offer valuable insights. Genesis teaches us about God's goodness and sovereignty, while the secret book of John challenges us to look within ourselves for truth. Together, they create a richer and more complex picture of human existence. Yet, this complexity leaves us with lingering questions. What if both stories are fragments of a larger truth, still waiting to be uncovered? And so, this contrast invites us to embrace the tension between the known and the unknown, between order and chaos, between the divine and the material. Perhaps, it is within this space between the narratives that we find the next chapter of our spiritual quest. Implications for humanity. The implications of the secret book of John transcend mere intellectual curiosity. They challenge the way we understand our own existence. One of the central ideas is the notion that every human being carries within them a divine spark, a fragment of the spiritual realm trapped in the material world. This spark is not just a philosophical idea. It's a transformative truth that invites us to reevaluate who we are and what our true purpose is. Take a moment to consider. What if everything you've been searching for, happiness, meaning, fulfillment, was already within you, waiting to be uncovered? The secret book of John suggests that the material world is like a veil, an illusion distracting us from our true nature. We live in a system that values the external, possessions, status, appearances, while neglecting the internal. This perspective isn't just spiritual, it's profoundly practical. How often do we seek validation from external sources, only to find that they don't bring the lasting satisfaction we expect? The text challenges us to shift our focus, seeking truth not in what we see, but in what we feel and know within. This awakening to the divine spark also carries ethical implications. If everyone carries this spark, then everyone is equally sacred. This idea challenges biases and divisions, encouraging a more inclusive and compassionate worldview. Imagine a world where we treated each person, regardless of their differences, as a reflection of the divine. This doesn't mean ignoring errors or injustices, but approaching them with empathy and understanding. After all, how can we condemn someone who, like us, is trying to overcome the limitations of the material world? The idea of a divine spark also reframes our relationship with suffering. If the material world is imperfect, then suffering is part of that condition. Yet, the secret book of John teaches that suffering is not an end in itself. It's an opportunity for growth and awakening. Think about moments of pain or difficulty in your life. While challenging, they often bring deep lessons and new perspectives. The text invites us to transform suffering into wisdom, using the challenges of the material world as steps toward the spiritual realm. Another crucial implication is how we perceive knowledge. For the Gnostics, knowledge, or gnosis, is the key to liberation. But this isn't intellectual or academic knowledge. It's inner knowledge, an acknowledgement of the truth already within us. This shifts how we approach education and learning. It's not just about accumulating information, but cultivating the ability to listen to our intuition and understand human experience on a deeper level. To illustrate this, think of a moment when you knew something without being able to explain how. Perhaps it was the certainty that a decision was right, even if all the facts suggested otherwise. These moments of clarity are examples of gnosis in action. They remind us that we have access to a wisdom beyond what we can see or measure. But to access it, we must learn to quiet the noise of the world and trust our inner voice. The text also challenges the concept of power. In the material world, power is often associated with control and domination. But the secret book of John redefines power as self-knowledge. Those who know themselves and their connection to the divine are truly powerful because they are no longer subject to the illusions and limitations of the material world. This is a power that cannot be taken away because it doesn't depend on external circumstances. Imagine how different your life would be if you were not defined by others' opinions or expectations, but by the knowledge of who you truly are. Finally, the implications for humanity are deeply hopeful. If we all carry a divine spark, then we all have the potential for transcendence. This doesn't mean the journey will be easy. The material world is still full of challenges. But these challenges are not insurmountable obstacles. They are opportunities for growth. Every act of kindness, every moment of reflection, every search for meaning is a step toward our true nature. Thus, the Secret Book of John not only offers a new understanding of creation, but also a roadmap for personal and collective transformation. It challenges us to look beyond appearances, embrace our inner light, and discover our own truth. But this journey is only the beginning. What happens when we finally awaken to who we truly are? That is the next mystery to explore. Now that you've been confronted with these hidden truths, what will you do with them? Knowing the universe is more complex than you were told may be unsettling, but it is also liberating. Within you lies a divine spark, a fragment of the spiritual realm that defies the illusion of the material world. This journey is not just about understanding what's around you, but discovering who you truly are. Are you ready to abandon the lies that imprison your mind and seek the truth that sets you free? Ask yourself, why are you here? What can you do now to reconnect with your true essence? Start small transformations today. Read, reflect, and question. Become a seeker of light in a world that tries to blind you with superficialities. If this content resonated with you, don't stop here. The journey is long, but every step counts. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Let's continue this quest for knowledge and understanding together. Each video brings a new piece of this puzzle, and you won't want to miss a single moment of this revelation. The awakening begins now. Are you ready to take the next step?